Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Chapter 14, Northing. Chapter 14 is the climax of the second half of the book, the via negativa portion. The via negativa portion strips away some of the exuberance of the first half, asking hard questions and noting the flaws and the darkness within the universe. And at this chapter, after practicing the via negativa stalking, and after experiencing a world that is chewed upon and bitten and filled with parasites, she reaches a point of final stripping away and openness. Dillard calls this chapter her favorite in her afterword, saying, "As I finished each chapter, I collected those index cards with bits I liked, but had not been able to use, and filed them under later chapters. The more I wrote, the thicker the later files grew. When I reached Northing, I thought, it's now or never for the best bits. So, exultant, starved, delirious on caffeine, I threw them all in." The chapter begins by emphasizing the restlessness of fall. It's September, the birds are restless, the leaves are falling, the woods are stirring. And that same image of wind that has been introduced early in the book and has continued throughout comes back again here. It's a new wind, and different from the engendering wind of the winter chapter, this wind will ultimately be a wind that pairs away. She watches the swarming ants and the migrating goldfinches, and describes the October restlessness as different from the restlessness of spring. She says, "In the spring, the wish to wander is partly composed of an unnameable irritation born of long inactivity. In the fall, the impulse is more pure, more inexplicable, and more urgent." Dillard herself feels this restlessness and seeks the heights. She notes the animation of the woods, the squirrels, the walking sticks. Even the trees seem animated. She comments on the sugar maple, saying, "I passed under a sugar maple that stunned me by its elegant unself-consciousness. It was as if a man on fire were to continue calmly sipping tea." As she continues in the first part of the chapter, we can see more and more her urge to go northing, to step off and walk north. These northings drew me. Present northings, past northings, the thought of northings. In the literature of Arctic explorers, the talk is of northing. An explorer might scrawl in his tattered journal, "Latitude 82 degrees, 15 minutes north. We accomplished 20 miles of northing today, in spite of the shifting pack. Shall I go northing? My legs are long." But instead of simply turning and walking north, she returns to her home, confronting the restless life bearing past her. On her way home, she sees a huge flock of robins, talking about how robins only flock like this in the fall. And as they all turn and stare at her, she says, "I'm staying here. You all go on. I'm staying here." And so she decides, instead of literally walking north, to receive a southing, to stay in place as all of the things north of her shift and migrate past her to the south, until all is stripped away. A kind of northing is what I wish to accomplish, a single-minded trek towards that place where any shutter left open to the zenith at night will record the wheeling of all the sky's stars as a pattern of perfect concentric circles. I seek reduction, a shedding, a sloughing off. She then describes a seashell found on a beach that has been so worked over by the sand and the sea that it has been honed down to a thin shard. It is an essence, a smooth condensation of the air, a curve. I long for the north where unimpeded winds would hone me to such a pure slip of bone. But I'll not go northing this year. I'll stalk the floating pole in frigid air by waiting here. I wait on bridges, I wait, struck, on forest paths and meadows fringes, hilltops and banksides, day in and day out. And I receive a southing as a gift. The north washes down the mountains like a waterfall, like a tidal wave, and pours across the valley. It comes to me. A moment later, she says, "Something is already here, and more is coming." We get a hint towards the winter chapter again, the hint that something is coming and arriving. She spends part 2 of the chapter describing the monarchs in migration. As these monarchs wash past her from the north, heading south, she notes in them with her usual attention to details the exhausted butterfly smelling of honeysuckle, the monarch who climbs to a great height and then coasts down to the top of a hill. These butterflies carry with them the scent and memory of summer, but as they float away past her to the south, she is stripped down and ready for the winter. She even links them back to the image of the pennies from chapter 2. Finally, at the end of the second section, she says, "It was as if the season's color were draining away like lifeblood, as if the year were molting and shedding. The year was rolling down, and a vital curve had been reached, the tilt that gives way to headlong rush. And when the monarchs had passed and were gone, the skies were vacant, the air poised. The dark night into which the year was plunging was not a sleep, but an awakening, a new and necessary austerity, the sparer climate for which I longed. The shed trees were brittle and still, the creek light and cold, and my spirit holding its breath." She begins the third section of the chapter by talking about sensitivity, the sensitivity of the needles of a compass during an aurora borealis. And then she focuses on a dream that she had of a prayer tunnel. A prayer tunnel was a special tunnel that Eskimos would crawl into for spiritual experience. And in this tunnel in her dream, a killing wind, killing cold, is blowing through. And so as she moves into the final part of this chapter, she moves in preparation for something, in preparation for a complete stripping down, even of life. She references a small acorn that has been screwed into the ground by a root, sticking up one thin stem. That too is being stripped down, but holding fast and ready. She says, "The death of the self of which the great writers speak is no violent act. It is merely the joining of the great rock heart of the earth in its roll. It is merely the slow cessation of the will's sprints and the intellect's chatter. It is waiting like a hollow bell with a stilled tongue." She then shifts to migrating geese flying low over a duck pond, and what she calls the heart-stopping blast of speed she felt, like being struck. She says, "It is the shock I remember. Not only does something come if you wait, but it pours over you like a waterfall, like a tidal wave. You wait in all naturalness, without expectation or hope, emptied, translucent, and that which comes rocks and topples you. It will shear, loose, launch, winnow, grind. I have glutted on richness and welcome hyssop. This distant silver November sky, these sere branches of trees, shed and bearing their pure and secret colors. This is the real world, not the world gilded and pearled. I stand under wiped skies directly, naked, without intercessors. Frost winds have lofted my body's bones with all their restless sprints to an airborne raven's glide. I am buoyed by a calm and effortless longing, an angled pitch of the will, like the set of the wings of the monarch which climb a hill by falling still." Notice the point she's reached at the end. She has glutted on richness and welcomes hyssop, she says. All the rich imagery that she's explored and immersed herself in throughout the book has finally been stripped away, and she welcomes hyssop, the bitter herb of cleansing. She closes with another image of Israelite sacrifice, the wave breast of thanksgiving. An offering that is waved before the Lord. She says, "The wind's knife has done its work, thanks be to God." And so she ends, like that seashell, completely stripped and pared away by this wind, at the conclusion of her via negativa quest. In the last chapter, she's going to conclude unifying all of her final ideas. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.